In today's episode of Project Recovery,
no big deal. I drive right on past. Then I have this impression come over me and it says, turn around and give her all the money. That's a lot of money. But I thought, how cool. So I flip my car around. I pull up, cute little fourth grade girl just sitting there. And
make sure you listen to the end. Find us on Facebook at Project Recovery. We'll have that and much more coming up. Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's about recovery. And it's brought to you by our friends at knowyourscript.org. They've got a lot of information over there. Go check it out, how to talk to yourself, talk to your loved ones, talk to your doctors, and find out what's really going on with opioids. I'm Casey Scott. You can hear my sultry, sexy voice right now. And you're going to be able to hear Dr. Matt. Dr. Matt, say something sexy.
So, love you, Case.
That wasn't sexy, and it was kind of echoey.
No, that wasn't sexy?
It wasn't sexy,
okay.
Kind of echoey. And the reason why is because, well, the way I like to say it is God gave me alcoholism, and he gave you COVID.
He sure did.
And
nailed me with it.
You've got COVID, and so
I've done all the right things. I got the vaccine. I wear the mask. I try to stay away from people.
And I've done the exact
Somehow
opposite.
I got it.
I go to the gym. I shake people's hands. I was at a convention on Tuesday where I probably hugged over 100 women. And I mean, but I'm still doing good. Test myself once a week, and everything seems to be going good. But
that's good, buddy.
Has it been kicking your butt? Be honest with us.
It has been. No, it's. If you look at the research on it, people with a vaccine, of new cases, it's 9-10% are vaccinated people, so pretty low. And then of those people that get it, they say the symptoms are less. But I wouldn't have wanted any symptoms worse than I've had. I've been out of work for a week. Today's the first day I've really done anything, and that's not much. We just have, the radio stuff set up here in my office at my house and talking to you guys. But no, it's been bad. A lot of fatigue, congestion, headache, not sleeping well. So it's been a bummer, not a vacation by any means.
Well, I offered to bring you some of my famous chicken noodle soup, but you said your girlfriend took care of you, so you're all good on that front. You're not really...
You're good, buddy.
You're not really sleeping, but we wanted to do this show because this is a responsibility that we feel greatly about, is being able to do this show weekly. I know there's a lot of people who tune in on the podcast, they tune in on the Facebook, and they want to know what's going on, and that's why we felt it is important to have them take some stuff over to you so you'll be able to do this, because without you, there's no Project Recovery, Dr. Matt. I mean, you're the voice of reason for what goes on in this world. Well, for me,
I don't
anyways.
know, Casey. I think it's a dual project, a triple project, really, because we couldn't do it without Josh. But I don't know if the listeners know. Over the last couple of years, we've done everything we can to work around vacations and other things, illnesses, so that we can get a weekly show out. And I agree. I wanted to do it. So thanks to the technology that we have here, we can do it.
And it kind of takes me back to my addiction. I remember when I was active in my addiction, I used to pride myself on being able to just go with any situation. And, I'm just the kind of guy that just goes with anything. Throw it at me and I'm going to make it work and we'll have some fun. One thing I found when I was in Pinnacle Recovery is that I'm a fan of a routine. I really do like a routine because it keeps me going. And so when I was in recovery, when you woke up in the morning, the first thing they made you do was make your bed. And I always fought this. I fought this since I was 5 years old. I go, Mom, why am I making my bed? I'm just going to get in it again. She goes, well, you need to make your bed. But I won that fight. My mom didn't. So I've always just had a messy bed. But now
did you tell her that you don't tie your shoes when you take them off?
Well, no, she bought me Velcro because I wasn't that good at tying. But here's the deal. You make your bed first thing in the morning because if that's all you've done the one thing at least right. And then hopefully it keeps going. And so now I have a routine. I wake up in the morning. I pee like most people, and then I get some water, get some coffee, go to the gym, come home, check emails and do that. And I'm a big fan of routines. And so I just want to know, kind of in your psychological world, is a routine a good thing? Because a lot of people go, I'm not a routine guy, but I think most of us want a routine.
No. Yeah, routines are highly associated with success in any part of life. Having some unstructured free time should be the exception, and it plays a role. It's very important, where you can just sort of have some creative time to do whatever comes to mind. But if you get up and have a routine, what happens is you're firing those neural pathways that become repetitive and stronger every time that you repeat a behavior. And so, if you get up and have a good morning routine, then it signals to your brain everything that's supposed to come next. And that usually has to do with optimism, positivity, energy, and getting things accomplished. And let's face it, we all have things that we need to get accomplished every day. And if you're feeling behind, under the gun all the time and not getting stuff done on your list, then stress is high and you feel overwhelmed. So having a routine helps with that. Nighttime routine, I talk to people about that all the time. People don't realize that your brain's going so much that if you just lay down and try to go to sleep without going through a nighttime routine, it's hard for your brain to slow down and calm down and get a good night's rest. So
that's why my nighttime. Go ahead. I'm going to say that's why my nighttime routine used to be 6 beers, because it would quiet and people laugh but that was because I couldn't stop my brain from going. If I lay and even to this day I have to fall asleep with the TV on so my brain will shut down, because if I'm left to my own thoughts, it just starts to just go one after another and another and another. Now, the meditation and the breathing has really helped me center that and slow it down and be able to access what I'm thinking about and letting it go. But back in the day, I could get a negative thought in my head and dwell upon that for days and get me spinning out of control. And the only thing that back then that I could find to make it quiet was some beers. And unfortunately that has a counterproductive effect on sleep. It may make you sleepy, but then you have a poor night's sleep. You're restless, and you often wake up, and it's not healthy for you, obviously, to do that. And having, doing something like meditation and whatnot in the evening is very, very helpful. I highly recommend it. But even just having a simple routine where about the same time every night you start doing the same things, you put on your PJs, you brush your teeth, you do whatever you do, read a little bit, get off the screens. Those kinds of things are super helpful. So you and I need to work on your TV at night. But that's I know why you do that, because that drowns out. You probably watch stuff you've watched 100 times, right? I'm watching NCIS again for the 4th time, and we're talking from season 1 to season 11. I can tell you about Gibbs, DiNozzo, Ziva, or whatever you want to know. I'm a big fan of the Is that the one with Ice Cube? No, that's Mark Harmon. The one I watched. The one with Ice Cube is Law and Order. And I also watched that as well. Oh, okay. Yeah. I've never seen either one of those. But, so, Dr. Mack. Yeah, so a routine's very, very healthy. And honestly, for anybody who is struggling with addiction, having a healthy routine, bookending both ends of your day, the morning and the evening, which are often weak times, times where people struggle with their addictions, a routine can really help you get through that and stay sober. This just popped into my mind, and I hope it plays out like I see it in my head. So you have an addict saying, I hate routines, but that addict is already in a routine of getting their drugs, using their drugs, finding more money to get drugs. I mean, it's just a bad routine, but don't get yourself twisted. It is a routine, right? Oh, definitely. It's a routine. In fact, your body gets used to that, and that's why when a lot of people overdose, it's because they've taken drugs outside of their normal routine, and their body isn't ready for it. You don't realize that everything we think and everything we do every day is either new programming for our brain or initiating old programming. And so your brain starts sending signals to your body about what to expect, like I was saying at night. If you start doing your nighttime routine at the same time every night, it starts sending signals like, hey, I know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to calm down and relax and go to sleep, and your body gets ready for that. Same thing with people who are in active addiction. The time of day, the situation, the people, all those things that are associated with their use come to play, and then you are very much in a routine. So when that changes, that can often be a high risk time for overdose. I just thought of this early on in my sobriety, probably for the first year. I don't notice it anymore, but for the first year, if I was sitting at a party, if I was sitting at a ball game, if I was sitting anywhere and I heard somebody open up a soda can, a beer, or whatever, that little tsh, my mind already went to, it's about to be a good time. I mean, it was like Pavlov's theory. I was like Lassie. He was like, what, the barn's on fire? I mean, it just came to me. I was like, hey. And that sound used to get me. And I used to go, I remember what that sound meant. But now it doesn't mean that for me anymore because I don't drink, and it's been long
Do you really
enough.
not get that twinge? Because that's called classical conditioning. You brought up Pavlov. And sounds, smells, tastes, times of day, situations, all of those things can trigger those responses that are so well ingrained in us, especially in somebody who's been an addict. So if somebody opens a can behind you, you still don't get a little twinge?
No, and I just thought of it now. For the first year, really bad. I could always tell. And almost to the point where my mouth would salivate. You know what I'd be like, oh, hey.
Oh, yeah, I would expect that.
We know that's going to happen, but not anymore. I think, and I don't want to say I got this because when you say you got this in the world of recovery means you don't got it and bad things are about to happen. But I think I'm far enough removed to where that doesn't really where my head goes anymore. Normally, I'd yell at my son, don't be drinking my last Diet Mountain Dew. Because he's trying to sneak it out of the fridge, because now I like a Diet Mountain Dew. I like it cold in the can. There's nothing better than that. So I don't think of beer anymore. Before we get to our guest, his name is Todd Sylvester. He's a counselor up at Wasatch Recovery, and he's a life coach for the past 30 years. That means he's been doing it before it became the in thing to do. I want to talk to you real quick because Dr. Matt on Facebook and Instagram, if it has the word recovery or addiction in it, I've subscribed to it, and so I get all their feeds. Oh. And I saw this meme today, all right? And I know you love it when I talk memes, but there were two dogs.
I know it's your main news source.
Yeah, there were two dogs. One was like a Shih Tzu, and the other one was a Great Dane, okay? And they both...
Little and big.
Little and big, and they both had mud on their legs. And the Shih Tzu was going, man, that mud is deep. And the Great Dane was like, what mud? And so it kind of got me thinking that, it's perspective. I remember when I was in recovery and my counselor goes, I see you. You're hiding in plain sight. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, you're here, but you're not really here. And I said, well, I just don't feel like I should talk about my problems because I'm talking to everybody else and their problems seem to be a lot worse than mine. He goes, dude, you're in rehab, so your problems are pretty big. But in my mind, I was downplaying him. And so it made me think of those two dogs. There's still mud there for both of them, but for one, it's a lot more. And it's not saying that the other guy doesn't notice mud, but it's just not as bad to him. And so, that's kind of what we talk about is that a lot of times we don't want to address us because we think somebody has it worse than us. But the reality is, if we're there, it's probably pretty bad.
Yeah, it is. And, there are a few problems with that sort of discounting of your own problems. Obviously, most of us are raised to not, want to walk around and wallow in our self-pity or our problems. But the truth is, if you don't understand your problems and if you don't face them, you don't really have much of a chance of improving them or getting rid of your problems, of being successful that way. And when people say, oh, well, my problems aren't as bad as someone else's problems, well, then you've just robbed yourself of an opportunity for growth, right? I mean, that's the only way we grow is by recognizing and addressing the problems in our lives, especially anything in the realm of addiction. And so, no, I like that. Definitely talk to people about that all the time, whether it has to do with more psychological things or addiction things, that you have to be able to recognize and deal with your problems if they're going to improve. And if you don't do that, then you're just robbing yourself of an opportunity, in my opinion.
I remember calling my mom in rehab going, hey, I'm in the wrong place. She goes, why? I go, there's people in here for meth, heroin, cocaine. I'm in here for Bud Light. She goes, you're an idiot. You're in there for the right reason. You need to shut up. Your problem is your problem. It might not be the same as theirs, but you're an addict just like them. And it took me a while to understand that. And I'm slowly learning more, and that's what this podcast is all about, is an education to everybody. So you're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL. Our guest coming up, Todd Sylvester. We'll hear his story coming up.
A gun in the face.
Then all of a sudden they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
Started 2 years of horror for an American in Venezuela.
They said, you need to give us your phone and get ready because you're coming with us.
I'm Becky Bruce, and I spent a year researching and piecing together Josh and Tammy Holt's story about their ordeal in a notorious prison.
That's when everything started to turn bad. We had another pound on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And there was the police once again.
You can binge all of the episodes of Hope and Darkness on KSLPodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That is Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist and currently battling COVID in the safety of his own home. We've sent over equipment. He's got a computer. He's got a microphone. He's got a laptop. Do you have a little TLC? Is your family taking good care of you?
Oh, yeah. My family's been great. I'm here in my sweats and my comfy chair, sipping some tea, feeling good.
So you still got your taste buds? You can still, well, you've never been able to smell, so that's not a big deal for you.
I can't smell things, but no, I've done a few little taste tests. I think the taste buds are intact. Yeah.
And for the record, you have your vaccination, but you were still one of the lucky ones to actually get it.
Yeah, I got my vaccination back before it was cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, you've always been on the forefront of being cool. You're like Depeche Mode, fashion forward. You know that?
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
You do not hear that a lot. Hey, our guest today is Todd Sylvester. I've been trying to get him on the podcast for over a year and a half. Yeah. He's super busy. He's a counselor up at Wasatch Recovery. He's also a life coach for the past 30 years. We have some mutual friends, yes. And they always tell me, you got to hear Todd Sylvester's story. It's amazing, and I'm so glad that we finally get to hear it. Yeah. So where does the Todd Sylvester story begin?
Well, first of all, thanks, Casey and Dr. Matt, for having me on. This is a great opportunity, and I'm glad we finally connected after this long, You know
what? People think that the recovery world is so small in Utah, but it's growing even bigger and bigger every year, which we couldn't be more grateful for and thankful. And the fact that you're celebrating how many years of sobriety?
32 years.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I think you might have the record.
Maybe.
For our show.
For our show, I think you
Definitely.
do.
Yeah.
So how old are you? Can I ask?
Yeah, I'm 53.
And so you got sober when?
Oh, boy. Now you're going to really test me here. It was 1990.
So you didn't want to be like Prince and party till it was 1999?
No.
No, you said, I'm out.
Yeah.
So where does the story, did you grow up here in Utah?
Yeah, I grew up in Utah. Just grew up in the Cottonwood Heights area, went to Brighton High School. Got a younger brother, older sister, pretty normal looking family. But it was a good upbringing, actually.
And so, I don't even know anything about your story. What was your DOC? What was your drug of choice?
Well, it eventually turned into, it was alcohol and cocaine, but it started with marijuana. And, I took my first sip of alcohol when I was 11 years old. My dad had a wet bar in the house, and, I didn't get drunk at 11, but that's when it started. And I knew what I was doing was wrong, but there was something about it that I thought, wow. I liked it. And
I think probably, Dr. Matt, I'm a lot like Todd in that, my parents had a wet bar, and I'd look around and I would see all these grown-ups having a good time, and it seemed that they all came together around alcohol. So it made it almost this magical, mystifying, concoction that, that this is what life's about. This is how they reward themselves.
Sure. So we call it modeling, right? Like that's unfortunately when you grow up around it, well, not always, obviously, but in these kinds of contexts that the two of you are talking about, parents having friends over and parties and things, you're what's modeled to you is sort of the fun part, the stuff that's on TV commercials, and as a kid, that looks pretty fun. Mom and dad are doing it, so it must be all right. So, that's a lot of kids who grow up with alcohol in the house, they see that. And unless they see the ugly side of alcoholism right away, then it's very tempting to want to sneak some drinks.
Yeah.
And so at 11, you take your first sip of alcohol.
Yeah.
And you knew it was wrong, but you wanted to do it anyways.
Yeah.
And do you remember it doing anything to you, or did you because sometimes I think kids think they're going to take that first drink, and we've had people on the podcast who have taken their first drink, their first pill, whatever it is, and they felt complete for the first time in their life.
Yeah, it wasn't that for me. I mean, it burned my throat, burned my lips, my mouth. I was like, whoa, But, my dad, speaking of modeling, he'd have a drink every night before he'd go to bed. He wasn't an alcoholic, but that's what he did. He'd have one drink before he went to bed every night. He's been
Drink
doing
like
it
a gentleman.
Yeah. And so in my mind as a kid, I'm like, what are you drinking? Oh, this is just for the adults, And so both my parents worked, and me and my brother, when parents weren't around, we'd go back there and we would just take a little sip here or there on the stuff that my dad was drinking. But it wasn't like, oh, now I'm complete. It was just like I fell in the rush with I know this is maybe what I shouldn't be doing, but there was something about it.
You're getting away with something.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's a rush in and of itself.
For
when
sure.
You're 11.
And Dr. Matt, like you were saying, my family would throw parties all the time, my mom and dad, and just seeing that, that's just the way I grew up. And so that was completely normal. And so looked like a blast, right? So I thought, man, this is what I'm going to probably end up doing. I may have not said that at 11, but that's what it was leading to. And
so then you said you started with experimenting with marijuana.
Yeah. So basketball, this is a really big part of the story because I think this is important. I learned at a very young age, I had this all or nothing mentality. I played every sport growing up, but in about 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I decided I was going to play basketball. That's what's going to be my focus. I wanted to get a college scholarship. And so I was obsessed with it. And I learned at a very young age. I mean, I was practicing 2 or 3 hours a day by myself in 6th and 7th grade.
Wow.
And I just...
How many times, Casey, have we had somebody on the show, yourself included, who this is part of the personality structure? Not for everybody who's an addict, but for such a high percentage of people that it's that all or nothing mentality. And so consequently, folks are often very successful in certain areas, but then when they apply that all or nothing to the drugs and alcohol, it gets pretty out of hand.
No, I mean, you're right. And that's how it is with me. I'm all or nothing, whether it's the gym, whether it's NCIS, whether it's alcohol. I mean, I tell you that, but I have to watch every season because I need to know how it finishes. And I cannot not finish it. And it's the same reason that I was such a good drunk. I would look around at all my friends and I go, I'm winning. Yeah. You know, I thought the goal here was to get drunk, and I'm way drunker than you guys, so who's winning? Me. But in my warped brain, it made sense.
Made sense, and that's where I was. Yeah, I'd have 4 pina coladas. My dad would have 1, and he'd be like, what are you doing? I'm like, why are you nursing 1? Yeah. Like, it just didn't compute in my head that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I don't understand. I was like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this.
Exactly.
So you were out there practicing on the basketball court by yourself in 6th and 7th grade for 2 to 3 hours a day. Yeah. And were you getting good?
Well, I was a short, little, skinny kid, and I mean, obviously, I was getting better. But again, I was a really short, skinny kid. Some of those kids at that age are big, and they're already getting hair under their armpits. Yeah. I was like a very late bloomer. But, over time, gradually, I just started getting really, really good. And I ended up making the freshman team at Brighton High School my 9th grade year. There was 18 kids on the team, which meant I didn't get to play very much. And it just fueled my desire to, like you said, I'm going to be the best. That's where my head was. I'm like, I'm getting a college scholarship. I'm going to play in the NBA. And after that season was over, at the end of my freshman year, I got invited with a friend of mine to go to Bear Lake for 4 days, 4-day weekend. So I went up with his family.
Raspberry days.
Yep. We pull into the campsite. Everyone gets out of the car. My friend holds me back, says, hold on a minute. I'm like, what? He goes, just wait a minute. So the family gets away from the car. He grabs his backpack, and he pulls out a 1/4 ounce of marijuana, a whole sandwich bag full. I didn't even know what it was. Honestly, at that point, And I go, what is that?
It could have been oregano.
Yeah, it could have been whatever. And he goes, it's marijuana. And he goes, we're going to smoke this. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, you're going to love it. And I kid you not, we smoked that entire bag in 4 days. Wow. I fell in love with it. And my all or nothing was like, I'm going to smoke this every day. And that's when the beginning of the horror that I went through. And again, that all or nothing mentality was obviously going to take me in a bad direction.
So did you go back and do the basketball thing, or?
Yeah. So now so I started doing that. A week later, I had another friend of mine whose parents, this is a week after the Bear Lake experience, his parents went out of town, and they asked me if I'd ask a family member to get us some beer for a party. So I went and asked my family member, and I try to keep that confidential. But he ended up buying us 10 cases of beer, a bunch of little kids with 10 cases of beer. You can't even imagine. That was the first time I really just got wasted. And I don't remember the night. The next morning, my friends were like, dude, you were crazy last night. And they were saying, you were talking to these girls, you did this and that. And again, it was just feeding my ego. And at that age, we want to fit in, we want to be accepted. And I'm not kidding you. I was like, I'm going to do this every weekend. So just to paint the picture, I was smoking pot at that point every day and drinking on the weekends. And then between my freshman and sophomore year, I grew 7 inches, which is really good for basketball. Yeah. And I mean, I'd be laying in bed, my knees would be killing me because of that growing pain. I mean, I just shot up. But I'm still practicing 2 or 3 hours every day. Sophomore year, I make the starting point guard of the team. We take first in state. I lead the team in every category. My junior year, we took second in state. I led the team in every category. My senior year, I was voted team captain with 2 other guys, and we took first in state again.
And all along, you're partying on the weekends and smoking weed every day.
Yeah, and by the time the end of my sophomore year, you know how this goes. I got, I'm going to try anything else under the sun. So I started back then. It was, this was going to really date me, but Quaaludes was a big thing back then. I started doing speed, cross tops, started, popping those and snorting those. And that led to me getting into cocaine and was doing mushrooms and cough syrup and
let me ask
went out of control.
Anything a kid could get his hands on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I know for the longest time I felt invincible. I felt like it didn't matter what you threw at me. I could do it, and I could wake up the next morning and do what I needed to be done, and it didn't affect me until it did. I mean, looking back now with the sober mind, I can tell that it affected me from the get-go. I was slower. I wasn't as sharp. I wasn't my best and all those other things. But I thought, hey, look, I'm having this much fun on the side and still doing this and still better than most.
Yeah.
And so it must be okay.
Well, I would say I'm going to take it one step further, Casey, and the psychology of that's called positive reinforcement. And so it's pretty hard to argue a kid out of it who is smoking weed every day, doing any drug he can get his hands on, drinking on the weekends, starting point guard, team captain, state champion, leading the league and everything. Like those kinds of things, you look back on it, you combine that with an adolescent's typical feeling of invincibility, and you're like, you can't argue somebody out of that. Like you're just like, what? This is not in fact, that's where I get kids come in the office and they say, I'm better at everything because I'm smoking weed every day.
And my parents are full of crap because they don't know, and I'm still doing it. I mean, that's one of those things. It's like, and then you sit down and you do that kind of old dated stuff about drugs, DARE in the program like that, and, they're selling you all this bad stuff, which will come to fruition and will happen for the most part, but it doesn't apply to you. It doesn't sound reasonable to you. It doesn't even make sense to you because you're doing the exact opposite and you're still winning. I mean, that's the maddening thing about drugs, alcohol, and any of that. It's a huge, huge lie. It gets you in, and then it throws you on your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're doing all this stuff, and everything.
What about your grades? What about your grades, though?
Oh, I was really poor at school. I mean, and this, I'm okay with it now, but at the time, I was in resource classes. I didn't study. I thought I was stupid. I had this belief that I wasn't smart, which actually fueled part of my addiction. Honestly,
did you have a learning disability or ADHD or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know, because back then my parents, we never checked things out. We didn't talk about this stuff. We just kind of,
nobody did back then.
But to put it in perspective, I took the ACT my senior year, and again, I'm okay saying this now, but I mean, there was a time I was really embarrassed about this, but I got a 5.
So you just barely got your name right.
Yes. I think you get like 3 points to put your name down. I got a 5. I kid you not. And at the time, I was trying to laugh it off like no big deal, but I got a 5 on the ACT. I had shaved my head and got my ear pierced all in 1 week, and it was the first time I saw my dad cry. And he knew that, man, I am just a complete mess. So my grades, Dr. Matt, were horrible. I was getting like 1.7s, 1.8s. But then during basketball, I was like getting past a 2.0 because I needed to be eligible.
But all your value and self-worth was in the fact that you were a party king and a basketball stud.
Yep, absolutely. And everything, like you said, was going well, it seemed like, until my senior year, and that's when things started to change. I noticed this voice in my head that I had, we all have it since I was a little kid, that negative voice that says, you're pathetic, no one likes you, no girl's ever going to want to date you, you're stupid, those kind of things. And for some reason senior year is when I really noticed how loud this was. And I walked around those hallways depressed. And the only time I felt somewhat normal is if I was partying and doing this. And, I was giving drugs away to my friends. I was throwing keggers at my house. And again, it was all feeding I was trying to validate myself. Look at all my friends. Look at all this. In reality, when the next day when I was hungover, I was just like, I'm the biggest piece of what.
Yeah.
you know.
We're going to find out more about Todd Sylvester's story in just a second. You're listening to Project Recovery right here on KSL. Welcome back. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. Our guest today is counselor and life coach Todd Sylvester. Before we took the break, Todd was talking about how he felt after the party, after everybody left. He was really starting to listen to that inner monologue about himself and starting to believe it, and talking about how it was actually making him more depressed. And Dr. Matt, you wanted to say something about depression because most people think it's just a feeling, but there's also a physical side of it as well.
Right. And I think it's interesting, depression, if you look at when it starts in a person's life, it certainly can start at a very, very young age. But the most common age of onset is about 18 or 19 years old. And so, Todd, you're talking about, how your senior year things started to really change. And the first thing you mentioned was that inner dialogue, self-deprecation, pessimism, negativity, especially towards yourself, a lot of, put-downs about yourself. And what's interesting about that is that a lot of people don't even recognize that that's depression, that's the beginning of depression. And in my opinion, the most destructive part of depression is the cognitive aspect, the negative, the pessimism, the put-downs. Because, if somebody else, I sometimes use the analogy with people, like if you had a friend following you around saying all those things in your ear, you'd probably punch them out. You'd be like, leave me alone, man. Yeah. Like, you are so annoying, and you'd fight it. But when it's in your own head, it takes on an element of realism and genuineness that we start to believe. And then those beliefs sink into the feelings of depression that we have. So I just wanted to point that out for people who are struggling with depression or struggling more specifically with recovery, is even if you feel like you can get up and you have energy to do things during the day, if your inner monologue is negative and pessimistic and self-deprecating, you need to get in and do some cognitive therapy on that, because that'll keep pulling you down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we're going to get back to Todd's story. And, with alcohol, drugs, or any kind of substance, the great lie is it works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
And at first it makes everything better. It seems to make you whole. It makes you forget. It does what it's intended to do. But what you don't realize is that there's going to be a bill that comes with that, and it's going to take everything from you. So you said your senior year, that's when you started to notice some changes, and things weren't working for Todd as like Todd wanted to.
Exactly. Yeah, I would play a couple really good basketball games and a couple really bad ones, and like my coaches, family, even my friends were like, "What is going on with you?" And I didn't put it together with the partying and the drug use. I was just like, I don't know. I'm not myself. And again, like I said, I felt very depressed. I was having suicidal thoughts. And I would walk down the hallway. If I heard someone laughing, I honestly thought they're laughing at me. I look funny. Like, it was like this kind of like a little bit of a paranoia feeling. And again, the only time I felt somewhat normal was, if I was using. And like I mentioned earlier, we took state my senior year. The state final game, I played the best game of my life. It just, for whatever reason, it just all came together that night. A week later, I got offered a full ride scholarship. So I was so pumped. My dad was so proud of me because we had worked so hard to kind of get to that point. And, I'm bragging to my friends that I got this scholarship. And so I got a couple months left my senior year. So I've got the scholarship in my hand. And that's when I just went overboard with the drug use and the drinking. And, I won't get into it because there's a long story. But I should have died several times. I drank so much one night. My blood alcohol level was 0.51.
Whoa.
I think lethal is 0.42 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I was a skinny kid.
Right.
I should have died. To put it in perspective, I beer bonged a fifth of vodka in 2 seconds.
My goodness.
Yeah. And that's how bad I was. Like, watch, I'm going to show everyone, like you were saying earlier, Casey.
Yeah.
I'm going to be number one at this.
Yeah.
Watch me. And so I just point that out for your listeners, that's how bad things got. Like, it's like you never kind of slow it down. It's like, how do I just keep getting more and more, like chasing the dragon, right?
Yeah.
And you never get there.
So, Todd, let me ask you this. Through the senior years and after winning state, you said you really turned it up. Did your parents ever call you out on the carpet? Did family members, did your friends ever go, "Hey, Todd, you kind of seem to do this in excess"?
Well, so, Yeah, my mom was probably the one that was most vocal. My mom, and she's okay with me sharing this, she was addicted to opiates. And so my mom was going through her own addiction at the same time. And but she saw the path I was going down, and she would just like almost beg and plead with me to slow it down, and right. But no one else, honestly, ever said anything. I had a few friends that were, again, you're with your buddies, like, oh, you're fine. You have a hangover. You'll be fine.
Well, they almost write it off. They go, last night was a night. You really were in rare form. And then they'll make jokes about it. But,
sure.
But towards the end, my friends didn't want to be around me anymore because of the rare nights. And it's because we grew older and we had kids, and they didn't want to invite that kind of chaos into their house that I brought along with me. And instead of doing what normal people would do and kind of address the problem, I found new friends who wanted that, and they weren't my real friends, but they would tolerate me and put up with it.
Yeah.
And so when does it come to a crashing end for you?
So this is a very important piece for your listeners, because so I started practicing with the team after graduation that I got the scholarship with. About 2 weeks into practice, the coach pulls me into the office and sits me down one-on-one like we're sitting here, and he says, what's going on? And right when he said that, I knew I'm in trouble. Mentally, spiritually, physically, I'm a complete mess. And I just said, Coach, I know I'm not playing well. I will try harder. I know I can be better. And he goes, Todd, this is the big boy leagues, and we don't have time to mess around. There's kids out there that have walked on that obviously want this more than you, and I hate to tell you this, but I'm taking away your scholarship.
Oh.
And I literally get on my knees, and I'm crying, and I say, please don't do this. I go, I know I'm not playing well, but I will. And he's like, the decision's already been made. I'm sorry. And my first thought was, how am I going to tell my dad? And then my second thought was, I've been bragging to everybody. I got a scholarship. Now I have to somehow tell them I don't have a scholarship. And I get emotional about this. I went into severe depression. I always call it like this. After that, I became an angry drunk. Mm-hmm. Every time I would drink, I'd punch holes in the wall. I'd throw chairs through windows. I would, I'd pick fights with people. I'm not a fighter. But I was hurting so bad that I was just I was having suicidal thoughts. I ended up trying out at several other colleges and universities here in Utah, and a few out of state, got cut from every one of them. And then I found myself living in Orem, Utah with 5 other guys in this house, a party house. And I call it the nasty house because we didn't clean it. I'm talking people would pee in the corner. We had a big brick wall. When we were done with our beer bottles, we would throw them, let them shatter, never cleaned it up. It was nasty. And the reason why I'm pointing this out, Casey and Dr. Matt, is that, and you guys will hopefully agree with this, is our outer world mirrors our inner world. Mm. And this house was a representation of my inner world. It was a mess, but I was a mess. And I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday afternoon, and reality slaps me upside the head. It says, basketball's over. You're never playing again. You're not, college it's done.
And how old are you at that point?
Oh boy, I think I'm around 20, between 20 and 21. And when that hits me, that's when I said, I'm ending my life. I'm going to go kill myself. And so I had planned it out. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to go home. I knew where a gun was. I was going to go in my backyard, and I was going to end my life. And that was a Thursday. Friday comes, and this is a very important part. I'm driving down University Avenue, and next to University Avenue at the time was Utah Valley Community College. I was attempting to go to school there, but I was failing everything. I was withdrawing from classes, but we'd always hang out in the lunchroom. And I'm in the lunchroom hanging out with, or in that lunchroom is where, like I said, we would hang out. Well, for whatever reason, instead of getting on the freeway and going home, I thought I'm going to go there first and kind of like a last goodbye to my friends. Mm-hmm. So I go and sit down at the table we normally would sit at. And as we're sitting there, I'm sitting here, and there's like 8 of us, right? Where there was these 2 LDS girls that would always come sit at our table. They drove me crazy. I don't know why they'd come sit with us. I would rip on them. I would, and but for whatever reason, they would come. They were always trying to get us to like come to church and all that stuff. And
ice cream socials.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't grow up religious. I was like, matter of fact, I was anti everything. My dad was. I kind of followed his lead. But this particular day, when I'm thinking about going home to end my life, I overhear these girls talking about fasting and prayer. Just in my right ear, I can hear them talking about it. And for some reason, that word fasting just hits me. I didn't know what it meant. I knew what prayer was. Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, I got to figure out what that is. And so these two girls stand up to go head to class. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ask them. I mean, I'm scared. Like my heart's pounding. I walk behind them, tap them on the shoulder. I said, hey, were you just talking about fasting and prayer? And they said, yeah. Why do you want to know? Like, because I was so mean to these girls. They're like, almost like, why are you asking? Are you going to? I go, no, I'm serious. Like, what is that? So they go on to explain what this is. And as they're explaining it to me, I'm thinking, what is the point? I thought it was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And they said, if you want help from God. And for when they said that, I thought, is there a God, and would God help me? And as I walked away, I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to do it. And so the next day, I don't go.
And you'd had no history with fasting and prayer.
Nothing.
Was prayer part of your family growing up? Doesn't sound like it.
No. Yeah, nothing. Okay. I mean, I obviously knew what prayer was, but we never prayed as a family. We didn't go to church. We weren't religious. Like I said,
it wasn't a skill set you were falling back on.
Nope. It was just one of those like, wow, would it work? Because deep down, so I didn't feel like I could go to my parents because my mom was, like I said, in her addiction. My dad, we kind of had, at the time, a strained relationship. And then all my friends partied. So I'm just like, I have nowhere to go. And so when I heard that, it was like almost like, you know what? What do I have to lose? And so instead of going home, I got back, and I would go back to that house that I was living in, the nasty house. And now the next morning, it's now Saturday, I thought, I'm going to do what these girls said. They said, start with a prayer. So I go into this little teeny coat closet, get on my knees, because I have to, because there's coats in there. It's kind of ironic. And I just said, God, if you're there, I need help. And that's all I said. And, you know, when you fast, you're supposed to not eat or drink. Well, it was the first time since Bear Lake I didn't smoke a bowl, pop a pill, have a drink. And I don't know if any of your listeners have ever fasted. They probably have. I mean, you can get kind of cranky. Mm-hmm. I was in a bad mood. And even my roommates were like, what's wrong? I'm like, nothing. Didn't want them to know what I was even doing. I made it till about noon. I was like, I can't go any longer. So I go back into that closet because they said end with a prayer. And I said, God, if you're there, I did this fast. I need help. And being naive, I thought, well, if God's real, he's going to show up. Nothing happened. And I'm not kidding you. I was disappointed. Ended up getting wasted that night. Still having suicidal thoughts, thinking about I'm going to go do that. And I wrestled with that for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then I had a miracle happen. And can we talk about that?
Yes.
Is that,
yes.
Okay. I get this phone call from a friend of mine named Rich, who I played basketball with at Brighton. This kid was a good kid. We didn't hang out because I was doing things he wouldn't do, that kind of thing. And this guy was a good guy, but we hadn't talked since high school. I get this random phone call. And you got to remember, this is before cell phones.
So we had to call landline.
Yeah. You remember when the phone used to ring on the wall? You either were excited or you were afraid. Don't answer it.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember my best friend's number, Tony Henderson, 801-479-3789.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
And so the phone on the wall rings, and it's like, do we answer it? That kind of thing. So anyway, he tracks me down, my friend Rich. He goes, hey, where are you at these days? I said, I'm down here in Orem. He goes, so am I. He goes, I need to talk to you. Would you come over and, catch up with me? I'm like, yeah, sure, which I thought was weird. Hadn't talked to him. I go over to his apartment, open up the door. There he is, real serious look on his face. And I point that out because this guy's a goofball, loves to mess around. I'm like, man, are you all right? He's like, no, everything's fine. Come on in. So we sit down just like this. We start doing weather talk, right? Well, he starts to say all these good things about me. Hey, Todd, you're such a good person. You're going to help so many people. And he kept saying you're going to help kids. And, I'm like, what is this guy talking about?
I live in the nasty house.
Yeah, I live in the nasty house. And you know this, Casey. It's not about the drugs and alcohol. It's the lying, the cheating, the manipulating. I'm doing bad things with girls and things. I mean, I am not doing good things. And he's saying all these nice things. I felt very uncomfortable. And I finally stopped him and said, don't say that. I go, you have no idea. My life's a mess. And he goes, Todd, I didn't go to work today because I have a share message with you. I'm like, what's up? And I can tell he's nervous, and he's just sitting there. And finally, he takes this deep breath, and he just said, "Hey, the Lord came to me last night, Todd, and says we need you on our side today." And when he said that, I don't know how to explain it, guys. I felt this feeling, like this love, like I've never felt before in my life. Like
the purest.
It just went right through me. And I'll be honest with you, as good as it felt, it scared the hell out of me.
Sure.
I was like, what is this? And you know how your mind can rewind back to moments? I tell Rich, I go, hey, I fasted and prayed for help. And he points in my face and goes, this is your help. And I was just like, whoa. And we're just sitting there in this silence. And I'm just like, did I just really get an answer to this fast and prayer? It was like this so surreal moment. And there's another big part of the story. I hope we have time that really ties this all together.
Yeah, lay it on us.
So he lines me up with a clergyman, a bishop, right? He says, you need to go tell your bishop everything you're doing. I don't have a bishop. He goes, yeah, you do. You just don't know it. So anyway, he tracks this guy down. Rich is one of those guys that will grab you by the collar, a good friend that will hold you and say, you better show up and go talk to this guy. He got me an appointment for the next day. So I said, okay, I'll show up. So I go talk to this bishop, right? I go in there. I'm scared to death. I thought, I'll listen to what this guy has to tell me and I'm out of here. Well, he doesn't say a word. He goes, tell me what's going on. Doesn't say another word. I'm just sitting there. Okay, so I start telling this guy what happened with the fast and prayer. Well, thinking I'm going to be there for 5 minutes, I unload on this guy for the next 3 hours. I tell him everything.
Everything.
Unload, right? Well, when I get done, I'm thinking, this guy's going to throw me out of his office. I mean, I told him everything. You know, he was probably going, oh, wow, I didn't realize what this guy's going through.
Yeah.
Now, what I didn't know back then, Casey, there wasn't a rehab on every street corner like there is today. This guy became my rehab. So he said, I got 4 things I want you to do. I want you to say a prayer once a day, read one verse in the Bible, and he goes, I want to meet with you every week for a year. And then he goes, and then the last thing he taught me, the most powerful principle, he goes, I need you to be honest with me every time we meet. And I go, well, I just told you everything. I go, what do you mean? He goes, if you use, if you lie, if you cheat, if you manipulate, tell me. I go, okay, you got that. So I start meeting with him every week. And every week I tell him, yep, I got high every day this week. Yep, I stole $50 from my dad. Yep, I did this. It takes me 8.5 months before I can look him in the eye and say, I made it 3 days clean this week. But I'll be honest with you, that negative voice in my head was still going strong. You're pathetic. You'll never be clean. You can't do this. It's too hard. You're pathetic. All your friends, they're married. They've graduated college. You got nothing. And I'll tell you, it was bad. Well, at the time, I'm a bartender, which is not a good thing to do if you're trying to stop drinking, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, as a bartender, I'd get tips from the waiters and waitresses because I would help them with their customers. And then anyone that sit at the bar, I'd get tips from them. And I'd get a bunch of change. And I'd have all this change in my car, quarters, nickels, and dimes, right? I had about $40. Back then, $40 in 30 years ago was a lot of money.
Oh, sure.
Right? So about this 8.5 month mark where I made it 3 days clean, I'm driving out of my neighborhood in Willow Creek. Out of the corner of my eye, I see this little girl selling lemonade. No big deal. I drive right on past. Then I have this impression come over me. It says, turn around and give her all the money in your car. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. But I thought, how cool. So I flip my car around. I pull up, cute little 4th grade girl just sitting there. And I go, how much for a glass of lemonade? She says, 25 cents. I said, I'll take one. So she pours it. I set it on my dash. And then I tell this girl, okay, cup your hands like this. And I just start scooping all this change. And this girl, her expression is tattooed on my brain. She starts freaking out. She gets emotional. I'm getting emotional. And I'm like, hold on, I got more. It takes me 10 scoops to give her all this money. The last scoop she throws on her table and she takes off into the house. And I'm thinking, she's going to go tell her parents some dude just gave her $1 million, right? Well, as I pull away, I start to cry like I've never cried before in my life. Have you ever cried so hard, Casey, that you feel like you're cleansing your soul?
Yeah.
It was a soul-cleansing cry. I have to literally park my car. I put my face in my hands, and I sob for like a half hour. And in that moment, I loved who I was. In that moment, I wanted to be clean. In that moment, I thought I mattered. It lit my soul on fire. There's a beautiful quote by Ferdinand Foch. He says, the most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. I'm on fire. And that all or nothing mentality kicks in. And I thought, if that girl's there next week, I'm giving her all my money. So the next Saturday, on purpose, I drive by, and sure enough, there she's there with her lemonade stand. And I pull up. She recognizes me. She starts freaking out again. I give her $25 in quarters. I do this the next Saturday. $50 in quarters the next Saturday. And all the money I'm earning as a bartender, ironically. And every time I pull away from that lemonade stand, I just lose it. And that is when my life started to change. But one more part of this.
I'm in.
Okay. Well, so 8.5 months, tack on another 2.5 months there. So it's almost been a year, and I'm still meeting with the bishop once a week. I'm still struggling on some level, but I'm feeling amazing right now. Seeing the expression of what I'm doing with this little girl at the lemonade stand. It's just unbelievable. Well, I decided to go to church for the first time. I thought, I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to go see what it's about.
Test the waters. And I'm going to sit in the very back corner, and I'm going to stay there for maybe 10 minutes, and I'm going to bounce. So I'm in the back corner. I start looking around the congregation. On the other side, there's that little lemonade girl with her mom. And she recognizes me, and she's like, Mom, there's the guy. And she starts waving and pointing at me. And I wave back, and my heart just starts pounding, just poof, poof. And I'm like, oh my, and I get emotional, right? Well, I decide to stay. After it was over, here comes the mom and the little girl, and the mom's crying. And she comes up and she hugs me, and she's in my ear, and she says, Todd, thank you so much for what you've done for my daughter. And I said, oh, no, you have no idea. This has been for me. She says, no, you don't get it. She was saving for a trampoline. You put her over the top. She got it. She just thinks you're the greatest in the world. And she goes, we have a favor to ask you. I'm like, what's that? She goes, on Wednesday, there's a daddy-daughter date. Would you go as her date? And I'm like, well, what about her dad? Well, we got divorced when she was younger. He's not a part of her life. She really wants you to go. And little does the mom know, she's asking this drug addict to take her 4th grade daughter on this daddy-daughter. And so I say, she's standing there. Her name's Lindy. She's smiling. I'm like, how can I say no? I'm like, sure. And as I walk away, I'm like, why did I say yes to this? So anyway, Wednesday comes, and I know I'm going through this quickly, but this is where we're getting to where my life changed forever. We're at this, I pick her up. We go up to the camp site where they're having a picnic, and all the dads are there with their daughters. We're late. I don't know her. I don't even know anyone there. And I'm sitting there going, why did I say yes to this? I'm like, I don't belong here. So anyway, we get there. I'm out of place. They start playing a game. How well do you know your daughter? How well do you know your dad? And I look at her. I go, sorry, we can't do this. She says, let's guess. Had I not been there, I wouldn't have believed it. We almost get every answer right. We're like high-fiving each other, and people are thinking we're cheating. I'm just like, what is going on? And then it hits me like, I'm used to waking up hungover with puke all over me, doing some of the most horrible things the night before, and here I am with this pure, innocent girl, and we're having hot dogs and Kool-Aid. Well, they gather everyone in to say a blessing on the hot dogs, which I thought was weird. I was like, you bless hot dogs? That's weird. Right.
Why do you do that? Is there something wrong with the hot dogs, right? So anyway, simple little prayer. I don't even know what they're doing. I'm following along. Okay, everyone's folding their arms. Again, you got to remember, I'm an infant in this. I have no clue. Well, this guy says a simple little prayer, just blessing the hot dogs and Kool-Aid. As he's blessing it, I hear this voice in my head. It says, Todd, you're in the right place, doing the right thing. You made an impact on this girl's life that she'll never forget, and I love you. And I don't know how to explain it. It was like this pure love, head to toe. I lose it in the prayer. Prayer gets over. They look at me like, dude, it's just hot dogs. Relax, And I'm like, and Lindy's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, these are happy tears. And it was in that moment, Casey, that I said, I am never, ever touching drugs or alcohol again. And I'm going to do my best to never lie, manipulate, or cheat. And I want to make an impact on kids' lives like hers the rest of my life. That was 32 years ago. And I did a drug-free program in elementary schools. I went head-to-head with I spoke to over 250,000 kids in that time frame over the next 5 years. And parents would come up to me and said, my son or daughter loves your program. Would you meet with them one-on-one? Not a clue what I'm doing. I said, sure. And that's how my life coaching started. And I just started meeting with these kids who were struggling, who didn't believe in themselves. And then it morphed into, obviously, what I'm doing today. And that was 32 years ago.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair for you to tell a story like that to a guy who has a daughter, because that's a pretty emotional story.
Yeah.
But what a powerful turning point in your life. And wow.
It's, it taught me a principle that, like, if you want to be, give it away. I gave away my money at a lemonade stand, and what I got in return is I got my life back. And you've probably heard this, Casey. If you master the first 11 steps of AA, you'll probably drink and use again. If you master step 12, you'll never touch another drop. What's step 12? It's going out and giving back and helping someone else. Service.
That's the thing. And Martin Luther King Jr.'s son spoke at a university here a couple days ago, and I heard a clip on the radio. And he says, a lot of people don't know what they can give, but what they don't realize is anybody can give service.
Yeah.
Anybody can give service. Anybody can give a helping hand, lend support, be there emotionally, physically, whatever. We all have that ability. There's so many people who reach out to us, Dr. Matt, that say, hey, this podcast is doing wonderful things for us, and thank you for doing it. And I always feel guilty because I go, you have no idea what it's doing for me.
Yeah,
I started this podcast for me. You know what I mean?
Amen. And congrats to you.
Yeah, as a way to get through my head and my feelings and let you guys go along for the ride. But the blessings that have come from doing this podcast and being able to hear stories such as Todd's and people week in and week out, Dr. Matt, I mean, it's really life affirming, and it's amazing that we get to do this. And I sit here and I listen to your story, and I mean, I'm awestruck, Dr. Matt. I mean, what is your takeaway from Todd's story?
Well, I just kind of sunk there for a minute into being a listener because that was such a powerful story, and I appreciate you, Todd, for being willing to come on and share it with us with our listeners. I guess the thought I'm having right now is that, no matter how bad you feel, no matter how hard your life is, giving to other people is the best way to get healthy yourself. And some of our listeners are struggling with addiction. Some are and or mental health issues, family problems, financial problems. Turning it around and finding ways to give to other people is one of the best ways to sort of recharge our own batteries. It doesn't make your problems go away, but it sure makes the energy positive in your life. And when you have positive energy, then good things happen. And so, I think that, something as simple as, following a prompting to stop at a lemonade stand, was a life changer for you. And I appreciate that as an example to any of us, whatever we're struggling with, because we all have things.
Yeah.
And I just love the way the story laid out. I mean, I keep going back to where the nasty house, where you said you lived there, but the outside matched your inside. And it really resonated with me because when I was in my active addiction, I was sitting on the back deck drinking beer by myself, and it was so lonely, but I was so alone inside as well. I mean, I had this job where I could go out and do TV and make people laugh, but when it was just me, I was alone. And we've said it on the podcast numerous times, but we're going to say it again, Dr. Matt. The opposite of addiction isn't abstinence. It's what?
Connection.
And you seem to find that connection in a lemonade stand. Really, and gave you purpose and service and kind of just set you on your road. Yeah. And then you gave back to over 250,000 kids in elementary school, started becoming a life coach, and now you're a counselor at a rehab center. I was speaking the other day at this conference, and when I was laying down on the ground, the only thing I could have hoped for in sobriety was tolerable. I just wanted a tolerable life. Yeah. I just wanted tolerable. Look, if I can pay my bills and I make it through, life's going to be okay. I had no idea it could be as good as it is right now. I mean, and that's what they tell you in recovery. They go, imagine what sobriety looks for. Now times that by 100, because that's what it can be. Yeah. But your brain can't comprehend it because you're so beat up, you're so broken, you're so turned in, you're so messy that it just is like, I can't imagine it being good. And the forgiveness of others and the willingness of others is amazing. I thought for sure after that happened, nobody would want to talk to me. Don't you know about Casey? No, that guy's bad. Yeah. No, but Like, I still don't know. I was in rehab, Dr. Matt. I don't know if we've said this on this, for 45 days. I don't know who mowed my lawn while I was in there for 45 days, but it got mowed every week.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, and I was like, who does that?
Yeah.
Some great person out there taking care of me and looking out for me and not kicking me while I'm down, instead of giving me a hand and a hand up.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
well, I think we feel, when we feel broken, when we feel worthless, like you've said today, Todd, feeling pathetic, telling yourself you're pathetic, we tend to project a lot of those thoughts and feelings onto the world and onto the people around us. And we forget that there's so many good people out there who see the good in us, even if we don't see it at the time.
Yeah.
And giving other, opening up our hearts and giving people an opportunity to serve us is just as powerful in many ways as us opening up our hearts to serve other people. But it's hard to see that when you're feeling at your lowest.
Right.
Todd, if people want to find out more about your life coaching services and what you do at Wasatch Recovery, how do they get a hold of you?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a website called toddinspires.com, and you can contact me there. I do a podcast as well, and they can
sure,
check
everybody
that out.
does a podcast.
Everyone's got that. But I was doing it before it was cool. I want to make that clear.
Life coaching and podcast. Todd was on the forefront.
No, I'm kidding. But that would be a good way there. And then you can also get there's a link there to Wasatch Recovery as well that, if people want to learn more about what that's about. So
awesome. Hey, thank you very much for stopping by and sharing your story. Dr. Matt, I hope you get feeling better. We want to thank everybody who stopped by and listened to the podcast today. You're listening to Project Recovery. It's brought to you by our friends at KnowYourScript.org. And in case you forgot, Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.